Now there's a significant pause, and we go, meanwhile, back in Bloomington, Theo and I aren't talking about bliss in school 50 years later in the homeless shelter. We're talking about schoolyard bullies, talking bullying teachers, and school systems with only two tracks. Counselors either shoehorn kids into college and professional careers, or reassured us the world really needed more mechanics and beauticians. Theo shared that he was a wreck long before he hit grad school, grammar school, high school. So stressful, he basically slept most of the time, recovering when he wasn't there. Later, jobs were the same for him. Me? Here's my story. Imagine a title screen. You're not that smart. I'm heading out the door of algebra. Mr. Connor gestures. Come here. Yeah, I shuffled, slumped. Shoulders, whatever. Attitude. What? I've seen your records, your test scores. He leaned in. He did that shifting his glasses to the top of his head thing. He meant business. I don't believe him. You're not that smart. Ouch. I don't even like reading this to you. Look, I'm going to give you a day in my high school life, okay? Not really one day, a mishmash of days to make a story. Here's some background. Kindergarten, teachers, I had two, both told my mother I was unusually creative and maybe smart. First grade, I was that kid who always raised his hand first. That's what my parents told me to do. And it actually worked for a while. But by the end of second, teachers weren't digging that raised hand thing so much. I never sat still. I never stopped talking. And I was well on my way to becoming a class clown. I read all my textbooks the first month. So, I got bored. The first time I made a comment that cracked the class up, it was all over. Then, with my luck, the results of my first IQ test came in. Off the charts, Stanford Binet, There was shock. Parent-teacher meetings. But my parents fought me skipping grades. It was a philosophy for them. And my poor parochial Catholic school had no other enrichment programs. The end results? I got labeled a smartass. Technical term, turns out. Honest. They showed me my permanent record. Scared the shit out of me. By third grade, Mrs. Leonard was one of a long line of teachers who bullied me into submission. Basically, that's when I started to shut down. Long before this day in high school. I want to dash down the hall to beat the bell for a little algebra. I dodge two guys and a girl who think it's funny to try to trip me. But tight end Steve, he body checks me, shoulder to shoulder. My books go everywhere. Hey, what happened to your shirt? An eruption of girlish giggles. 2 periods ago, some seventh grader had screamed, fairy loop, and ripped the loop off the back of my Madras shirt. And they were a big thing in the 60s. Left a big hole. I say nothing, but my teeth are grinding. I feel nauseated again. I make it into class. Maybe we were doing quadratics. I don't remember. Because 5 minutes, I'm fighting sleep. As usual. I use all my tricks. I try staring at the sweeping red second hand of the class clock, seeing how long I could hold my breath. Nothing spectacular, maybe a minute 50. After about 10 minutes of trying to set a record, I switched to counting my heartbeats. See, I was reading yoga philosophy, Krishnamurti, Yogananda. I wanted to see if I could slow my heartbeat. like yogis do. Seems like I remember getting it from about 80 to 60. That actually made the time fly for a while. Then I'm doodling. I used to do these weird maze-like patterns of intricate intersecting lines, pages of them. My hand would cramp holding the big pen. Mr. Knapp. The whip cracked from the teacher's desk. I glanced at the chalkboard. C squared. I was right. What are you doing there? He doesn't care I'm right, which never makes sense to me because it's never about being right, even when I'm wrong. I think better when I'm doodling. Karen, you know about that. Well, in my class, learn to think without doodling. Okay, Mr. Connor. So I'll go back to counting my breath. On the way out, he corners me. You're not so smart. My memory is a little hazy, but replaying the scene as an adult, I believe he wanted to motivate me. My quizzes were sloppy, lots of mistake. He thought I was a lazy kid who wasn't as smart as I thought I was. He probably was right. You think things come easy to you. He glares a moment. You got to drill. Like any student, you actually got to drill. Drilling was big with him. He didn't know it, but I was barely functioning. All I heard was, "You're not smart." That evening was the first time I remember considering suicide. I'm sorry, guys. It is hard to perform this. That evening was the first time I remember considering suicide. A few years later, I tried the first time at 17. In 7th grade, I left a substandard parochial school in Minnesota. My father took a job in New York, and that made me the new kid in a well-funded public system in a wealthy suburb of New York. Just as the puberty hormones were hitting, and kids my age were splitting into cliques. But I'm a stranger, weird, a loner, awkward physically, God knows socially. The peer bullying was horrific for years. When I say my previous school was substandard, I was 6 months to a year behind in coursework for my grade level when I transferred. But one science teacher really believed in me and fought for me to enter the honors track, which meant they had already covered all of 7th grade math before I joined them. And that was the second semester. So I had to learn all of 7th grade and the first month of 8th instantly. They just handed me textbooks and told me to catch up. There was a certain amount of resistance to me being moved ahead, shall we say. No tutors, no review classes. Just go read. I was fucking overwhelmed, okay, guys? Who cares what my IQ was? So old man Connolly, he really popped my cork. A rage meltdown, days of recovery, absent from school, sick. We used that a lot. I almost had to repeat 4th grade because I was sick so much. After years of this, I graduated in the top 10 of my class. I aced every aptitude test. I went on to grad school, many attempted careers, but no one, not one educator thought I lived up to my potential, because not one of them knew I functioned at best a couple days a week. In and out of incapacitating depressions, frustrating bouts of not being able to speak under stress, that's selective or situational mutism, inability to meet deadlines, prioritize tasks, and on and on and on. Between the natural differences of my autistic mind and the effects of an abusive childhood, and frankly, my social, sexual, and educational abuses in school, This is all the potential I had left.